Newsline.
A very good evening and welcome to Newsline. I'll be your host for tonight. My name is Ravi Gamage. Now, the European Union is the second largest trading partner with Sri Lanka, so clearly the EU is a very important partner and a market for us. Now, official relations between Sri Lanka and the European Union started as way back as the early 1960s, but it wasn't until 1995 that a mission was opened in Sri Lanka, which is also accredited to the Maldives as well. Now, joining us tonight is the European Union Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives, His Excellency Denis Chaibi. Welcome to our show tonight, sir.
Thank you.
Right. To just understand, why does the European Union have a presence in Sri Lanka and the Maldives? I mean, apart from the topic that we're going to discuss today, in general terms, explain to me why does the European Union feel they need to be in the country?
Yes, it is a question that I often hear in Sri Lanka. What is the European Union? Why do they need to be here? Is that an embassy? And it is more complicated for a nation state. So the first thing we do is to try to have political and economic relations with Sri Lanka. And obviously the member states who are here are at the forefront of this effort, but we try to have synergies and coordination on that, and we try to negotiate what is done at EU level. So for example, we have a working group on trade, and so the trade negotiation, so the tariffs that are paid by European products going to Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan products going to Europe, it is negotiated by us, and that is the famous GSP plus preference that is granted. We have a working group on development. So over the last 20 years, there's been more than €1 billion spent in Sri Lanka, all grants, no loans, nothing to reimburse, all grants, and it has been on different projects. At any point in time, we have €100 million invested in projects that we are managing, and tourism is one of these projects, but a relatively small compared to the whole range of projects. We have a working group on human rights and rule of law, where we exchange our experience on all the fields where human rights are an important factor. For example, all the diaspora of Sri Lankans in Europe, migration, how they are treated. And I think that in Europe they are treated well because they absolutely want to stay and get double citizenship. But also many other areas. We have discussed for many years the PTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act, as a condition to keep benefiting from the GSP+. So we do all this at the level of the EU, and that's why we have a diplomatic mission here, which works in close cooperation with the member states of the European Union here.
All right, fantastic. Now, a few days ago, or actually earlier in this year, the EU launched a communications campaign to promote tourism. Can you let me know why the EU is so keen on promoting tourism in this part of the world?
So let's go back in time. I arrived in 2019, just after the Easter bomb attacks, and tourism was suffering already enormously. And after a few months, COVID came in. And so we gathered with the team of the cooperation section, the experts, very good team, and we discussed what's going to happen in the future and how can we help. And we could anticipate that with COVID and the Easter bomb attacks, tourism revenues in terms of foreign currency would diminish, and this would put a lot of pressure on the economic situation in Sri Lanka. So already back in 2020, we discussed this, and we decided at that time that for the next year, when there would be a recovery, we would invest in tourism with different angles, not to try to put all the eggs in one basket, but try many different things in COVID. And I think we were right, because the default that Sri Lanka has known is because of lack of foreign currency. You know, it's remittances, it's exports, and it is tourism. And tourism is the one where, you know, Sri Lankans are in control and they don't need to import that much. Because for exports, you first need to import, for example, all the yarn for the garments to be exported. So we invest in that, and we try to have different efforts. We can discuss them. And now we want to communicate about that, because now is the recovery time, and tourists around the world are ready to come back to Sri Lanka. I can see that Indians, Russians, Chinese are coming back faster than Europeans. It has a lot to do with airline proximity, easiness. But we want to do also something for European tourism to come back. European tourists spend more time, are generally more respectful, and most important for Sri Lanka, spend more because they stay. So we are looking at ways to bring back European tourists to Sri Lanka.
Okay, so this is clearly not something that you all just envisaged and activated this year. This has been a long time coming. So I presume you all have a long-term vision for this as well. How do you see this panning out in the future?
So we are looking really at a long-term plan, but in anything we do in Sri Lanka, we insist that it has to have the ownership of the Sri Lankans. So what we are doing is setting up all the ideas we've had with partners, but it's for the Sri Lankan authorities to move that forward. I think the best example, and I will come back a lot to that one because it's emblematic of what the EU has done, is the Pico Trail. Okay. So the Pico Trail is a beautiful walking trail from Kandy to Ella and Nuwara Elia, 320 kilometers going through tea country. Okay. We have paid for, with the USAID, we have
This
paid,
is an EU initiative?
It's an EU initiative with USAID, but we have done most of it. And the trail is there. It's traced. The concept is there. The marketing is there. The logo is there. The app is going to be there very soon. We're going to launch that officially a bit later in August. But now it's for all the plantations, the hotel owners, the Tourism Promotion Association of Sri Lanka to manage it and to see what is the best way to make sure that tourists who go there can interact with the local population, you know, have a nice meal and then go to all kinds of hotels, perhaps more modest, perhaps more luxurious, and along the trail, so that there's an incentive for tourists to be here and discover this beautiful part of Sri Lanka.
All right. Something that came out from you in the earlier answer was that it's for the people of this country. And I keep on hearing these words from you about how it should be regenerative, sustainable, and also y'all are looking to build capacity. So y'all are not just coming and doing one singular project and leaving. Y'all are trying to build it up from the grassroots up. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So we are a bureaucratic organization, so a bit technocratic, but there are some advantages to that. Before we commit the money, we have a 7-year plan. So we work with 7 years plan. So there was a 2014-2020, since the year that starts and ends are included, that's 7. And now we are 21-27. So for 21-27, we have 2 overarching priorities: green recovery and peaceful and inclusive society. So all the actions we do have to be within that. So in the green recovery, we want to put the spotlight on biodiversity, on whatever the Sri Lankans can do to manage this incredible wealth that they have. This island is unique. It is the first landmass from the South Pole in the Indian Ocean. So it has all the things that winds can carry for so long. So it has, you know, 750 species of vertebrate, 1,500 invertebrate, more than 3,000 plants. And half of it is always endemic, unique in Sri Lanka. So we are really focusing on that and, you know, helping the Sri Lankans to have ownership and promote that in a sustainable way.
Okay. Now, obviously you know more about this than I do. How aware are the local tourist operators or the hospitality providers about the need for regenerative, sustainable, green projects like this?
Well, I think that this is part of a collective effort.
Clearly you saw a gap in it, that's why you're doing this.
I think also the situation has changed. You know, post-COVID is a different tourism. And perhaps not everyone has realized that. It's not the same for everyone. For some part of the world, revenge tourism, which is, you know, after COVID you want to revenge tourism, you want to go out and you know, compensate for the time that you could not travel. But for some in the world, it's about getting to these places that are in all the magazines, or go for shopping, shopping tourism, which is to go to these big European brands, mainly French, Italian, and do that. For Europeans, it's not. For Europeans, after COVID, after having been in a closed house or apartment for many months, and Europe is very densely populated, it's about nature. It's about being out. It's about meeting people. It's about having the food, having no waste. That is the post-COVID tourism for Europeans. And I think that Sri Lanka is fantastically well equipped, but must realize that its assets are not just the beaches. It is the people, it is the tradition, it is the history, the civilization, and these beautiful tea trails, mountains, but even, Jaffna, the forts, all that has not been on the map so far. It can now attract many more European tourists.
Okay. Just to get a feel of it, now obviously the EU and Sri Lanka has had relations for a long time. How aware are the European tourists about what's available in Sri Lanka though? Like, I know the Sri Lankan government has been promoting tourism in Europe for a very long time. Is that level of awareness there where people come here for that specific type of tourism?
No, not yet. Not yet. And to be brutally frank, in Europe, the lingering legacy of the images of last year troubles are still, more important than the Pico Trail or this kind of initiative. But that's why the EU is investing in communication campaign in Europe to change that. So we will have influencers coming that are part of our efforts. We are making a lot of public relations on this initiative. So for example, this Pico Trail was last week in the New York Times as one of the 7 best walks for 2023. And it was, with a beautiful pilgrimage in Japan. It is inspired by Santiago de Compostela, the famous trail in Europe. So we are getting out there, but we hope that this will not just be an EU effort for this year, but that this will be sustained by all the operators, the hotels, in the long run.
Okay. If I digress a little bit, how was this Pico Trail project envisaged? Who envisaged it? How was it put into action?
Well, as I said, in 2020 we were discussing in our team, and we were discussing with professionals of tourism in Sri Lanka, but also some people from USA IDEA. And collectively we were like, well, the Santiago de Compostela is an interesting project. We have here the combination of a Buddhist heritage that is quite strong, Mihintale, but we have also the beautiful tea trails where you have lots of Tamil populations. So, we have beautiful civilizations inspired by Hindus, by Buddhists, and all that in one country. There's something we should develop there, and so that's why we came up. We're also very lucky that a tour operator here, a guide who is European but has been in Sri Lanka for more than 25 years, had always this dream since he saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. He thought, okay, the trail should go through this.
You wouldn't believe it, a lot of people don't even know that it was shot here.
Yes.
Right. So we're in conversation with His Excellency Denis Chaibi, the European Union Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And we're discussing about some projects that they're doing here in Sri Lanka. We haven't even started to discuss their most recent project. We're going to come back to that right after this break.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Broadcasters Guild of Sri Lanka calls on the government to immediately withdraw the Broadcasting Regulatory Bill. Committee on Public Finance approved Domestic Debt Optimization Program. Parliament debate limited to 1 day. Interest rates to drop after Debt Optimization Program, says President. Protests continue against slashing Samurdhi benefits. SLPP MP Jagat Kumara to go to court. New Air Force Commander assumes duties.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline with me, Ravi Gamage. We're in conversation with His Excellency Denis Chaibi, the European Union Ambassador to Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Welcome back, sir. Now, I want to ask you about a project you all organized recently in the Kalpitiya area. You all called it the biathlon, not biathlon, biathlon. And I'd like to ask you, okay, first, why the name, why Kalpitiya, and what was the objective of this project?
So bio, it's obviously a pun on biathlon, which is two sports, but biathlon is sports to put the spotlight on biodiversity.
Okay.
And Kalpitya is one of these many regions in Sri Lanka that is, has this unique blend of nature. You have a fantastic coral reef, you have an incredible bird population, you have the lagoon life, you have Wilpatu. So it's one of the places in the world, not just Sri Lanka, where within less than an hour you can see the biggest mammal in the water, a whale, and the biggest mammal on earth, the elephant in Wilpatu. So, we thought this is unique, and this is also where the EU has had a project we discussed earlier, the integrated approach of the EU. So we've had a project called Colibri, which is about community livelihood biodiversity recovery initiative. So in 3 places in Sri Lanka, Knuckles, Kalkuda and Kalpitya, we have come with GIZ, with ACTED, sorry, an organization, and with local communities we have discussed how can we maintain this incredible biodiversity and its incredible natural wealth. So because we have done that there in Kalpitya, we wanted to put the spotlight on Sri Lanka's wealth in terms of biodiversity. So that was the project. So we brought famous sports people. We had 3 Olympians. It's the first time I could run next to 3 Olympians. Cricket players, rugby players. And so we interviewed them about biodiversity, and your channel did a great piece with the first mountain climber, the first woman who climbed Mount Everest for Sri Lanka, Jayanti.
All right.
And so she speaks very eloquently about biodiversity in Kalpitya.
So how receptive were all these famous sports personalities to come and join you all in this endeavor?
Well, I have to thank them. They were really good sports, which you would have expected. But in addition, they were enthusiastic, interested, interacting with the local community. So it was a fantastic experience at all levels. We hope that this will be done every year, perhaps with corporate sponsors or with other diplomatic missions, because it was really a very happy time.
Okay. So how much of participation did you all see from the local communities, and how well was it received?
Well, local community was very interested in sharing their experience, and especially, with famous sports people. I think it's a big motivation for people who make an effort to see that there is attention, there is recognition, and there is value. So our interaction with the local community, as I felt it, perhaps others had different impression, but was very positive.
Okay. I also understand that during this project, one of the emphasis was on getting the youth involved. Why was that such a strong focus?
Well, if we talk about sustainability, we are talking about nature in the future, and the future is youth. So it was a very basic proposition to have the youth involved, so that the earlier they are aware of the need to preserve nature, the longer their efforts will last and the better the impact will be.
Okay. Can I get an understanding of, you all were there for 3 days, I believe. What kind of activities you all engaged in, and what kind of an outcome you all got out of it? Was your objective achieved?
Yes, fully. The idea was to combine awareness with sport and fun, but thinking that one reinforced the other. So I think we got a lot of coverage, and I thank your channel for the coverage received, but also on social networks we got really a lot of very positive comments and likes and exposure. But more than that, in the activities themselves, before going for a kayak race, we started to clean the beach, and within 10 minutes all the people realized that in 10 minutes you can collect more than 30-40
So
kilos.
the community came together and they collected.
Community, sports people, the diplomats were there. Every time they were doing something for the environment, and they could see very quickly the results, so that with a minimum investment you have already a big impact.
Of course, fantastic. How will this initiative be promoted back home in the European Union?
Well, what we want to do is show visibility. So the visibility of this action, I hope, will allow for the EU to devote more funds to biodiversity with more actions. Not exactly the same, but in the same field. As I said, we have two big priorities. And on the green recovery, we would really like to put more biodiversity. And I think we will come with a sizable amount that will be announced very soon.
Fantastic. So this is certainly not your first project. Can I get some more information about the other EU-funded projects which are supporting the protection and biodiversity in Sri Lanka?
Well, we've had this pilot, this community livelihood biodiversity recovery initiative. So it was called Colibri. It was done with ACTED, and it was about the sensitization of local communities.
Colibri again, if you could just
Colibri.
explain?
So it is the official title. The acronym is Community Livelihood and Biodiversity Recovery Initiative.
Okay.
So this kind of project is really a management and education project. How local communities can manage their natural resources. In the case of Kalpitia, is fisheries, coral reef, beach, and this. So it's about how do you eliminate plastic from your consumption and purchases. How do you manage a coral reef? Which means how do you make sure it regenerates quicker? How do you provide livelihood to the fishermen in the area of tourism and biodiversity? How, for example, to train them to have the license to be a pilot for boat for tourists, which means that they need to know first help, first aid. So you train them in first aid, you train them in English, you train them in bringing the tourists to spots that are interesting, such as coral reef, but giving them the instructions to make sure that they don't impact the biosystem, the ecosystem. How you train them to go and see the whales or the dolphins, but without impeding the view of those mammals. So it's all that. It's about training and management, and we're going to do many more projects. We have done a lot of things on biodiversity and tourism. So we've done ecotourism. It's not only the Pico Trail, but we have done homestay, and we have trained people. And overall, even on wellness, we've trained lots of people on Ayurveda. We did a new syllabus with the authorities, but we trained them to do Ayurveda in hospitality, not Ayurveda just for Sri Lankans, but Ayurveda for foreigners who visit in nice hotels and pay more and give more money to Sri Lanka.
Sure, fantastic. Now, obviously, the local partners, the hospitality providers, tourists, they are going to receive this program really well. But what kind of support are you getting at policy level? Because I think that's really where real change starts to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the president had as one of his first action to have a climate plan. So I think that at the top level there's strong awareness. We have excellent relations with the Ministry of Environment and in particular the Secretary.
And they're supportive.
And they are very supportive. But at the same time, I think that the importance of nature and climate change and biodiversity for the future of Sri Lanka has to be mainstreamed through all the ministries and with proper transition. I think that the first objective is energy. Sri Lanka has one coal power plant, consumes a lot of energy.
Quite close to Kalpitia, in fact.
Close to Kalpitia. And, at the same time, like for many other things, Sri Lanka is a very rich country and a blessed country. Sri Lanka is one of these countries that has mountains and rain, which means that hydropower is easy. It has lots of wind because it's an island. It has lots of sun. It is tropical.
Of course.
So, with basically $15 billion investment, which obviously is a lot when you're in default, but which in the great scale of things is small, with $15 billion, Sri Lanka could become carbon neutral by 2050.
Absolutely.
In energy. And that would be already such an advance in terms of environment. So this is one of the major steps, but many other steps can be done as long as it is mainstream. We've seen the decision on fertilizer to move from chemical to organic in one day is not possible.
Of course.
But to have a strategy is very important. So for example, because of the lack of fertilizer, the EU imported with the FAO chemical fertilizer, but also at the same time that we did that, we did a training program for farmers to move to organic and to produce their own organic farms and to have better technique. So that is the kind of transition where it has to be mainstreamed across all the ministries, and in this case the Ministry of Agriculture was very responsive and very happy with this initiative, but all the ministries have to think in terms of transition like that.
Of course. I know you're not an expert on this, but would you, if you could venture a guess, would you say it's easier for a country like Sri Lanka, an island nation, to achieve this as opposed to a bloc like the European Union? Because you're such a large area with such diverse... just a guess, perhaps.
As I said, Sri Lanka is blessed with natural wonders and a fantastic geopolitical situation and this kind of things I mentioned. So that is the very positive side. Mm-hmm. The negative side is all transition requires money. There's climate finance. Mm-hmm. And obviously the overall economic crisis has an impact on climate finance. So the president was recently at a summit in Paris where France was looking at how we can make sure that the current economic crisis and what may be a recession in the coming months doesn't impact the money that is available for climate transition. Okay. And I think that Sri Lanka, by moving out relatively quickly, we are in the middle of the domestic debt restructuring, but so far, so good, is an example on how you can get out quickly of default and then very quickly look at green finance and attract investments, because there is money available, but it's on a kind of competitive base. Absolutely. And you need to have good project, good regulation, transparency, no corruption, tenders, not giving project to one country or another. So if all that is respected, then I'm very confident that Sri Lanka can move fast.
Fantastic. So we're running out of time, but very quickly, if you could just parting thoughts for people who come to Sri Lanka, tourists, or even the local tourists who travel to these unique areas in Sri Lanka, what would your advice to them be?
Enjoy. This is the most beautiful place on earth. You have a unique chance to see all that without too many people. It is unique. It is a mix, as I said, of civilization, refinement, people. It's very safe. People, as I said, have the images in mind that there are riots and upheaval. It's very safe. People are incredibly honest and careful. So I would just say to the people, enjoy. This is unique.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And with that, we're going to wrap this edition of Newsline up. So the European Union is clearly doing its part at a time when we need all the help we can get. Once again, Your Excellency, thank you to the European Union and to you being personally here and driving these initiatives for us. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Good night.